Happy Africa Day, everybody. It is a great joy for me to be here with you today on this day, May 25th, 2026. On a day like this, 63 years ago, May 25, 63 years ago in 1963, Africa's founding presidents formed the Organization of African Unity, an organization they hoped would realize Africa's unity, would speed Africa's unity. So today I want us to pause and reflect on that dream of African unity. And as we talk about these founding presidents, as I show you the video that I'm about to show you about these founding presidents, ask yourself this question. If these guys would be there today, would they be proud of the Africa they would see? Or would they in fact shed tears of sorrow and anguish and desperation? Would they wonder what we've been doing for these 63 years? I know many of them are actually to blame for the foundation that they built, and we're going to get into that. But before we go there, before we get into that, I'd like you to confirm Badri Adam 696. Please confirm that you can hear me. Please confirm that you can hear me. I don't want to spend all this time talking only to realize that you cannot hear me. So please confirm that you can actually hear me. Can you hear me? At Badri Adam 696, thank you very much for joining me. Please confirm if you can hear me. Okay, I'm going to continue in faith, and I want you to understand one thing. Today's Africa must take a very honest look. Oh, great. Thank you very much. I'm happy that you can hear me. Great. So now we can dig right in. So today, May 25th, is Africa Day. It is an amazing day. Thank you very much, Catherine. I'm glad you can hear me. Sorry, I had those difficulties before. Now, I want to share something with you. Do you see this? This is dry hibiscus. I remember when I was in Senegal, the first time I ever visited Senegal was back in 2007, 2006, thereabout. And I found this drink here. It's all over Dakar. It's all over Senegal. Bissap. Bissap is made from dry hibiscus. This is dry hibiscus. And it's all over Senegal. I remember asking them, this drink is amazing. Why is it that we don't have it in Southern Africa? We don't have this in Eastern Africa. Yet we have hibiscus. And the problem is that instead of this, we have that global, universal soft drink that is everywhere in the world. The reason that I'm explaining that is this. If Leopold Senghor, the first president of Senegal, was to rise up today and discover that Africa continues to consume imported drinks much more than local drinks, soft drinks that is, that multinationals continue to becoming richer and richer, even as the farmers of Bissap in Senegal don't really reap the benefits of what they're doing because other African countries are not consuming this Bissap as much as they do in Senegal. Wouldn't he wonder why Africa continues to struggle with food sovereignty? But I'm getting ahead of myself. I'm going to show you a video of these founding presidents. And as you watch them, I want you to reflect about your own country, about the entire Africa, and ask yourself this question. If these people were to come back today, if the generation of Africans that were there in the 1960s were to come today, 63 years later, would they be proud of the Africa that they see? Ask, ask yourself that question, because unless we understand where we have come from and the mistakes that we have made, then these days, like Africa Days, will continue being merely cosmetic. But we need to grasp the substance of the mistakes that we have made so that we don't repeat those mistakes. Let's have a look at this video now. And as you do so, please reflect on what I've just told you. Great. So those are some of the founding presidents of Africa. Their stories are not always amazing. They're not always inspirational. But we cannot run away from the fact that those are some of the founding presidents. And I want to tell you a little bit about some of them, because once we understand the kind of foundation that many of these founding presidents built for Africa, we can begin to appreciate some of the challenges that we face today. Remember, if the foundation of a house is faulty, it doesn't matter how marvelously you build the rest of the house, that house might be living on borrowed time. Which is why today, on this Africa Day, May 25th, 2026, I would like us to take a brutally honest look at some of the cracks that are in the foundation of the Africa that these founding presidents built, so that we can begin to build a much stronger foundation upon which we will build an absolutely transformed Africa. Now, I'm going to tell you about 5 or so of these presidents, and then we will listen to 2 of them. And after that, we will conclude. But remember that our goal on this Africa Day is, of course, to celebrate where we are as Africans, but to also appreciate that we still have a very long distance to cover, and we cannot successfully cover that distance if we run away from the mistakes that have been made in the past. Now, one of these presidents is Ben Bella. One of these leaders is Ben Bella, Algeria's president. You saw him there. This guy, he fought for France alongside thousands of other Algerians in the Second World War. And then France turned against him. His mistake, the cardinal sin that he committed, was the one that a number of African presidents were accused of committing at that time. During the height of the Cold War, any African president who associated with the Soviets, with China, was immediately persona non grata in the West. He became a mortal enemy. And so some of the transformative presidents that we had at that time, who were perceived as being on the wrong side of the Cold War, were completely frustrated. And Ben Bella was one of them. A very charismatic fellow, a great leader. However, he was only president for 2 years. His presidency did not last beyond 2 years, because the great, immense behemoth of Western military and diplomatic power trained its guns on him, just because he refused to be in bed with the West. And yet he had fought with the French. Remember that, because that brings me to Kwame Nkrumah, one of the founding fathers of the Organization of African Unity and an avowed Pan-Africanist. Kwame Nkrumah said powerful words that are so relevant today. So relevant. When he said that we face neither east nor west, but we face forward. We face forward as Africa. Ask yourself, is Africa facing forward today? Or are we again being divided into these matters of you are with the West, you are with Russia? And meanwhile, we are not even with each other as Africa. I'll come to Kwame Nkrumah later, because once you understand what facing forward truly means in today's Africa, a lot of the debates that we have about should we support this country or that country, a lot of those debates will become a moot point, because we will realize that we still have a very long way to go regarding Pan-African unity. And we should be much more preoccupied with Pan-African unity. Let's go to the next founding father, Cameroon, an amazing African country. The founding president was a guy called Ahidjo. Ahidjo had mastered the art of using music to bolster patriotism, to bolster unity in Cameroon. However, there was a crack that he couldn't fill in the foundation of Cameroon, and to date, Cameroon continues to suffer because of that. Now, let me just give you a quick fact here. Cameroon has only had 2 presidents since the 60s, since they attained independence. 2 presidents, Ahidjo and the current president, Paul Biya, in his mid-90s. And a couple of months ago, he appointed his own son, Emmanuel Frank Biya, as the vice president. So you can see that these shenanigans still continue, and some of them have their foundation in those early days of the 60s. The crack that Ahidjo was not able to fill up in Cameroon was the Anglophone Cameroon and the so-called Francophone Anglophone divide in Cameroon. So to date, we continue to have fellow Africans in the English-speaking part of Cameroon who are demanding for their own country, who continue to be persecuted, and they say that we want our own country. Ahidjo was never able to handle that in those early days, and to date, Cameroon continues to struggle. Moving on, there's a guy called Maurice Yameogo. Maurice Yameogo. I know this does not ring a bell for many of you, but Maurice Yameogo was unfortunately the founding president of Burkina Faso. The founding president of Burkina Faso. And many of the problems that Burkina Faso continues to face are because Maurice Yameogo completely sold his country to the French back then. He also perfected the art of imperial presidency. He built a palace in his own hometown, Kudugu. He built a palace there, and Maurice Yameogo would a lot of times be away from Burkina Faso for as long as half a year. He would be gone on vacation. Before you shake your head, I want you to realize that even to date, we continue having African presidents who spent unacceptable amounts of time traveling. And every time they travel, they're spending millions. They are forever traveling. All that was normalized by presidents like Maurice Yameogo. It is not by accident that the only thing that could then pull Burkina Faso from this pit that Maurice Yameogo had dug for his own country was the revolution, the Sankara-led revolution. That was such a bright, shining star that it continues to shine today. Out of the darkness of Maurice Yameogo, in partnership with France, out of that darkness, the brightness of the revolution that was led by Thomas Sankara emerged. And to date, Africans continue to draw inspiration from that revolution. Moving on briefly before I show you another video, when you look at a country like Benin, Benin just had elections the other day, and Patrice Talon, the president who had been there, had finished his 2 terms, and now the country has a new president. This country, Benin, is a very special country. And their founding president was a guy called Hubert Maga. Before Donald Trump's MAGA, there was MAGA, the person, the president in Cameroon. However, he was just as showy as Donald Trump. He was just as showy as Donald Trump. He built a palace for himself in Cotonou, the capital of Benin, at the time called Dahomey. And then in this palace that he built for himself, he built a golden balcony. Does that ring a bell when you compare that with Donald Trump? A golden balcony at a time when Benin was a very young, newly independent country. He also perfected imperial presidency. When you look at that, you begin to understand why imperial presidencies are so normal in Africa. Because a sizable percentage of these founding presidents were lords of imperial presidencies that were self-serving and not serving the people. Before we go on, I'd like you to watch about my book, The Savannah Footprints. This is a book that I did 2 years ago that gives the story of all these founding presidents. I took a deep dive into their lives, and then I unearthed the lessons that today's Africa should learn from them.
Just a quick one before I go on. Last year, I wrote a book about historic African leaders like Thomas Sankara, Patrice Lumumba, Julius Nyerere, and of course, Ibrahim Traore. There are nearly 100 of them in that book. Many of you have already bought the book, and I'm very grateful for that. If you haven't bought it, please head on to Amazon and purchase your copy. Both physical and digital copies are available. Thanks a lot.
Very sorry, I think the audio there was bad, but feel free to go and purchase that book. If you just want the digital copy, just send a WhatsApp and we will see how to get that to you. Thank you very much, everybody who is here. Tony Barnes, I'm very happy that you caught this live. Thank you very much for reading my articles. I truly believe that we must have a conversation as the people of Africa. And as we have that conversation, we must be the generation that will truly, truly, truly change Africa. But it cannot be done by words alone. It can only be done when we do things differently. Now, I want to tell you about two other presidents. Do you know Hufet Boigny? If you're not from West Africa, you may not even be familiar with that name. It's not a particularly easy name. Hufet Boigny, this guy was the founding president of Cote d'Ivoire, Ivory Coast. He was the founding president of Ivory Coast, and Hufet Boigny was so wedded to the French, he was so close to the French that Kwame Nkrumah, founding president of Ghana, once asked him, why are you this close to the French? Don't you know that Africa is free? Why are you this close to the French and not your fellow Africans? And then the answer that Hufet Boigny gave Kwame Nkrumah is still relevant today. It's still so relevant today because in this answer was the mindset that a lot of presidents in today's Africa continue to exhibit. I'm going to read for you what Hufet Boigny told Kwame Nkrumah. He told him, You go your way, I'll go my way with the old colonialists. In 10 years' time, we shall see who has done the most for his country. You go your way with this radical Pan-Africanism of yours. I'm going to go my way with the French, the ones you're calling old colonialists. And in 10 years' time, we will see who will have done the most for his country. You see, that's an attitude that says, all I want is results for my country. And I don't care how I get those results. And it is an attitude that then assumes that you cannot get results for your country if you're only working with your fellow Africans. The only way to get results is by working with the French, with the British, with the Americans, with the Chinese. Before you throw a stone at Hufet Boigny, do you know that's exactly how our presidents still behave today? Look at the France-Africa summit that was in Kenya the other day. It took Emmanuel Macron and his summit, co-chaired by Kenya's President William Ruto, it took those two to bring together more than 25 African presidents. They couldn't come together on their own to discuss transformative Pan-Africanism, to answer the question of how can we free Africa from the dollar? How can we de-dollarize Africa's economy so that we can break free from the shackles of the dollar and the euro? They didn't do that. They only came together when France brought them together. It's no wonder they always troop to those summits. But they don't come together to discuss critical challenges that Africa is facing, to find pragmatic solutions to those challenges. Because just like Hufet Boigny, they continue to have that attitude that our help will come from the West. Our help will come from China. And so they look for investors. They lose sleep over Western investment, Chinese investment. Meanwhile, Ethiopia proved through the grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam that your money and my money, your $1 and my $1, your $100 and my $100, our money together as 1.4 billion Africans can actually transform this continent. It can actually do it. The Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam was built by Ethiopian money. Think of how much more we can do if we stop having that Hufet Boigny attitude that you go your way, I go my way with the old colonialists. And in 10 years' time, we're going to see who will have done more for his country. I'll have you know, fellow Africans, that to date, cocoa farmers in Cote d'Ivoire continue to wallow in poverty. Yet, chocolate remains a multi-billion-dollar industry. So clearly, Hufet Boigny did not get any gains from going into bed with the French for all that time. Let's look at one more before I show you a video of Leopold Senghor and speak a little bit about what's going on in Senegal. I just want to show you briefly that what's happening currently in Senegal has its roots in what happened in Senegal 63 years ago. Modibo Keita, this was a founding president of Mali. And his story, what he did, together with Kwame Nkrumah, together with Sékou Touré, the founding president of Guinea, what those three presidents did was ahead of its time. And it's something that Africa must now pick up. But first of all, I want you to watch Leopold Senghor, and then we're going to speak a little bit about the link of Senegal 60 years ago and Senegal today. And we will conclude with Modibo Keita, Kwame Nkrumah, and Sekou Touré. More specifically, what they did and why we must pick it up again today. Let's watch Leopold Senghor, the first president of Senegal.
What binds us lies deeper. What binds us is beyond history. It is rooted in prehistory. It arises from geography, ethnology, and hence from culture. It is that community of culture which I call Africanness. I would define it as a sum total of African civilized values. Africanness always shows the same characteristics of passion in feelings and vigor in expression. The consciousness of our community of culture, our Africanness, is a necessary preliminary to any progress along the road to unity. Without it, there can be no will, let alone an effective effort to reach unity. We have a common soul, which is embodied in our Africanness. All that is needful is to recognize it and take it on. That means we must begin by rejecting all fanaticism, whether racial, religious, or linguistic. Then and then only can we define our aim lucidly. Whatever the difficulties of the undertaking, I am convinced that we can succeed if we want to. But to feel that want, we must think of, accept, and be conscious of what we have in common, our being African. Long live eternal Africa.
Now, those are beautiful, powerful words. And as we draw inspiration from those words, I just want to tell you a little bit of what happened in Senegal in the first 3-4 years after independence. And then you'll see the link between that and today's Senegal, what's happening between President Bassirou Diomaye Faye and immediate former Prime Minister Ousmane Sonko. Leopold Senghor was the president of Senegal, the founding president of Senegal. And the first Prime Minister of Senegal was Mamadou Dia. Mamadou Dia believed very strongly that Senegal must chart its own economic path. He didn't believe in what he called slave economics, where Senegal remains bound to France and to the West. And so he championed an economic sovereignty for Senegal. However, Leopold Senghor didn't want to go down that route. He didn't want to do that. Leopold Senghor, just like Houphouët Boigny, was extremely close to the French. He was extremely close to the French, and he believed in Africa being able to coexist peacefully and harmoniously with other cultures. In the case of Senegal, the first culture would be the French culture. So he embraced that kind of harmony with France, so much so that he did not want to sever Senegal from France, economically speaking. And so after only 2 years, he orchestrated events that led to the ouster of Mamadou Dia, the first Prime Minister of Senegal. That's how Senegal remained a country that was completely in the French corner, which is why Emmanuel Macron in Nairobi boasted when he was asked why the Sahel states were not at the France-Africa summit. He boasted and said that big countries from West Africa are here. And then he mentioned Senegal and Cote d'Ivoire. So you see that relation that was forged way back then, the special relationship between Senegal and France, between Cote d'Ivoire and France, is still very much alive and active. And anybody who tried back then to get rid of that relationship, anybody who is trying today to get rid of that relationship, ends up facing the wrath of France pulling the strings in the shadows, like puppeteers. Now, do you see the similarity between Mamadou Dia, Leopold Senghor, and Bassirou Diomaye Faye, Ousmane Sonko? Just like Leopold Senghor, Bassirou Diomaye Faye, the current president of Senegal, has also engineered, has actually sacked, to put it bluntly, he has sacked Prime Minister Ousmane Sonko. Exactly what happened 60 years ago. Which is why, fellow Africans, I began by telling you that unless we learn from the mistakes of the past, we are doomed to repeat them. Thankfully, Ousmane Sonko seems to have learned from what happened to Mamadou Dia, the first Prime Minister of Senegal. Ousmane Sonko is on track to become the Speaker of Senegal's Parliament because his party, PASTEF, is a majority in that parliament and he's the leader of that party. So he's making moves. Mamadou Dia ran out of moves to make and he was tragically checkmated by Leopold Senghor. But it's a different story. It's a totally different story for Ousmane Sonko. He is not going to be checkmated. He has thought ahead several moves, several positions, and he knew the move that President Faye and his sponsors were going to make even before they made those moves. So watch this space tomorrow. If you're watching this on Tuesday, let me just say that this week, this final week of May, we'll see Ousmane Sonko ascending to the very top of parliament. And from there, he'll continue making his moves. We need to learn something from there so that we don't end up like Mamadou Dia, an amazing, true, transformative servant leader who was checkmated by that unholy alliance of the president of Senegal at the time and France. That's not going to happen this time around. But other African countries, other African leaders, transformative leaders, need to realize that the enemy is always watching. And if they're not prepared, then there'll be trouble. Let's watch a final video of the founding president of Burkina Faso. I've already told you about him, Maurice Yameogo, but I want you to see him so that when you look at Ibrahim Traoré, you can understand what it took for Burkina Faso to reach where it has reached.
A big breath of pure air, a new definition of man, a new ethic, a new way of imbuing human relations with humanity has been born in Africa. This flame has sometimes flickered. For a long time it remained spluttering, but today it sets aglow a new heaven of hope. Africa is not monolithic in thoughts. It obviously cannot be so in politics. And this affirmation becomes a fortiora, even more obvious from the moment when we leave the geographical area of Black Africa and enter the realities of the modern Arab world. There again, the profusion of ideas, the will to renovate and make progress, the richness of the philosophic vision have nothing to envy in those of any people or any continent. But this at the same time shows us the importance of elements to take into account for the synthesis. The power of imagination, the will for tolerance which must preside at the birth of the community spirit of our future regrouping. In the same way, we must build as solidly as possible what already exists. So we must grant sufficient flexibility to the permanent organs of our future union, so as to enable it to withstand all shocks without the danger of falling to pieces. Our new union, although it must live and set an example, should, above all, maintain the spirit of tolerance and neighborly love. Long live Africa, united and free.
Long live Africa, united and free. Now, I want you to understand something here. Those words look beautiful. That's the speech that Maurice Yameogo gave on May 25th, 1963. But it didn't mean anything to him, because the same guy who spoke those beautiful words proceeded to provide leadership that was contrary to the very words that he had spoken. He went ahead to build that palace, even when Burkina Faso was going through a very difficult period. Just like today's presidents who say the right words here in Africa, most of them, 95%, they say the right thing, but their policies are completely opposite to what they're saying. So let us never look at what these presidents say. Let us always look at the policies. Let us always look at the actions, because many of them are disciples of Maurice Yameogo. Thankfully, Ibrahim Traore chose to be a disciple of Thomas Sankara. I'm going to leave you with this challenge. A time has come for every African who truly cares for the continent and wants to see a transformed Africa. A time has come for all of us to pose the question to ourselves, to look in the mirror and pose the question, what can I do? If you can run for office, run for office. And don't follow the footsteps of Maurice Yameogo. Follow the footsteps of Sankara. If you don't want to run for office, support transformative leaders who are doing so. Because at the end of the day, we should not reduce our sovereign power to lobbying and advocating from the sidelines. Unfortunately, the Western-style democracy that Africa inherited, and we must begin conversations on how we can develop our own Afrocentric forms of governance. But for now, we still have that Western-style democracy. Let us make the most of it, even as we move to more Afrocentric forms of governance. And so on this Africa Day, May 25th, 2026, I challenge you all, I challenge myself that this must be the generation that takes Africa to the next level, a level where the African dream has been realized, a level where young Africans don't have to dream of the American dream. It's possible, it must be done, it will be done. My name is DJ Bwakali, and Africa is my superpower. It is your superpower too, because sovereign power is vested in our hands as Africans. Let us use it. Never ever forget that we are the boss. It's not the presidents, it is us who are the boss. So let's use our power to completely transform Africa. If you haven't subscribed, please click that button and subscribe. And if you can, join the African Awakening channel. That greatly boosts us to do what we're doing. We're just getting started. Thanks a lot for stopping by today. I'm sorry I couldn't share my bizap with you, but you can make it. Just look for the dry hibiscus flowers and make some good old hibiscus, make some good old bizap for yourself. It is way better than this.